Welcome back, lovelies. As you know, all month long, I am on a mission to fix your dinner dilemmas. And today we are making some really tasty freezer meals. Now, of course, these can be prepped in big batches and then stored in the freezer until you're ready to cook them. What could be simpler? If you're looking for a great way to make freezer meals even more convenient, I think you should check out this hack video I posted on the channel a few years ago. Basically, it saves you all sorts of dishes, which of course I love. So be sure once you're done watching this video to take a look for that. Now, without further ado, we are going to get started with our first recipe. Today we are making what I like to call a sort of deconstructed stuffed pepper casserole. Of course, the concept here is all the deliciousness of stuffed peppers without the fuss of actually having to stuff them. Right? You get where I'm going with this. And this recipe starts, as many of my recipes do, with a skillet heating up on the stove. I've got a little oil in that skillet. To that, I'm going to add some finely diced onion and, of course, some peppers. I've got lots of peppers here. I've got 2 red bell peppers and 1 green bell pepper. You can use any combination of colors that you like. I kind of dig the fact that it looks like Christmas in my skillet. Once those onions and peppers have had a nice chance to soften up, we are going to add some ground turkey to the pan. Now, I'm using poultry just to keep this on the lighter side, but of course, with a classic stuffed pepper, you would use ground beef, so you have lots of options here. If you want to keep this vegetarian, you definitely also have the option to use veggie ground, veggie crumble, that sort of thing. Once our ground turkey is no longer pink and completely cooked through, we're going to add some minced garlic, a sprinkle of smoked paprika. We're just gonna quickly hit this with some salt and pepper, and then we are going to add our rice and our liquids. Now, you definitely have 2 options here. You can either add some cooked rice if you have some left over, or you can cook your rice right in the pan with all of this goodness. Then I'm going to add some chicken broth and some diced tomatoes. I'm going to give it all a good stir, bring it to a boil, and then reduce my heat to medium-low, pop the lid on, and let it cook away until the rice has absorbed all of that liquid and everything is cooked through. Once that yumminess is all ready, you can transfer this mixture into a casserole dish. Then you are going to let them cool completely. This is really, really important. Once they're cool, we're going to sprinkle on our cheese, cover them in foil, and get them into the freezer. When it comes time for dinner, you can cook this right out of the freezer. You basically just want to put it in the oven, covered in foil, for about 30 minutes or so. After 30 minutes, you can remove the foil and cook it for another 10 or 15 minutes. The idea here is just to make sure it's warm through, and of course that cheese is nice and melted. This is comfort food to the max. Next up, we are making a super hearty shepherd's pie, but instead of potatoes in this recipe, we are going to be making it with a cauliflower crust. That makes this dish a little lower carb, which of course everyone can feel good about. We're going to get started, as we do, with a nice hot skillet on the stove. To that, I'm going to add some butter. Once that butter is nice and melted, I'm going to fry up some onion and then some garlic, and then I'm going to add my ground beef. Now, I do know that shepherd's pie is traditionally made with ground lamb, so if you want to use that, that's totally fine. Technically, a shepherd's pie made with ground beef is actually called a cottage pie. I always grew up in a household where we used beef and still called it shepherd's pie, so that's what's happening here. Once your ground beef is completely browned, it's time to build some flavor into this bad boy. To do that, we are adding some tomato paste, which has a nice concentrated tomato flavor. We are also going to add some Worcestershire sauce. You can have at it in the comment section below if I mispronounced it. We're also going to add some fresh herbs. So I've got some fresh thyme leaves, and I've also got some freshly chopped rosemary. 2 of my favorites, as you guys know. To that, I'm going to add some beef broth to add some much needed moisture to this. We'll give that all a good stir until it's well combined. As that beef broth cooks down, all of those flavors are going to become nice and super concentrated. Then we are going to add some veggies. Now, there is a lot of debate about what sort of veggies belong in this kind of dish. I like to use a combination of frozen peas and carrots and some frozen corn for sweetness, but of course, go ahead and use whatever veggie combination makes you happy. There really is no wrong answer. Once everything is combined, we're gonna pop the lid on our dish, reduce our heat to low, and let it cook down until almost all that moisture is evaporated. Then we're gonna set that yumminess aside and get to work on our cauliflower crust, which starts, of course, with a whole head of cauliflower that I've just cut in 2 florets. I'm simply going to steam my cauliflower with 1 inch of water in the bottom of my pan until it is very, very soft. Trust me on this one, you kind of want to overcook your cauliflower because we're going to be mashing it. It makes it a whole lot easier to deal with. Once that cauliflower is cooked through, we'll just transfer it into a nice big bowl. To add a little creaminess and a little dreaminess, I'm going to add some butter to this. I'm also going to add some salt and some pepper, a little splash of milk, and a little fresh parsley never hurts. Once your mash is where you need it to be, you can transfer your meat mixture into a casserole dish and spread the cauliflower mash on top. And there you have it. It's ready to either be cooked right away or frozen for up to 6 months. When it comes time to cook this beauty, you can go ahead and do it the very same way, into your oven at 400 degrees Fahrenheit with a little tin foil on top. I always recommend removing the tin foil 10 or 15 minutes before it's done cooking so you can get a nice golden crust on top. How good does that look? Trust me guys, you'll be thanking me 4 months from now when you've had a really long day at the office and you've basically got a hearty homemade dinner on demand. For my final recipe, I've got an incredibly flavorful chicken chili. We are going to top it with some tasty cornbread topping. How could that be bad? It all starts with a nice big pot on the stove. We're going to get some oil fired up and then get our veggies going. I'm adding some onion, some celery, and some bell pepper. I'm going to cook those until they're nice and soft. And then of course, it is time to add some heat and some smoke with a little bit of chipotle pepper. Love chipotle pepper, as you guys know. We're also going to add some minced garlic. I've also got some spices happening here. I've got my chili powder, my ground cumin, and a little dried oregano. We'll let that sizzle away for about 30 seconds or so, or until all those spices really start to get activated, and then we will add the rest of our ingredients. So we've got some canned red kidney beans going into the pot. These have been rinsed and drained. I'm also adding a few cups of cooked shredded chicken. This is the perfect place to either use leftover chicken or one of those handy dandy rotisserie chickens that you can get at most supermarkets. For a little sweetness, we'll add some frozen corn to this. We are then going to add our liquid. So I've got some crushed tomatoes. Need to make this chili nice and saucy. We like our chili saucy. And some broth for good measure. Of course, I'm going to season this with some salt and some pepper, stir it all together and bring it to a simmer. Once it's got its simmer on, I'm gonna reduce my heat to medium-low, put the lid on my pot, and let this cook away. Now, of course, the longer you cook this, the more flavorful it's going to become. But because this goodness is going to be chilling out in the freezer for 4 to 6 months, you really don't have to worry about overdoing it. While that is simmering away, we are going to get started on our cornbread crust, which of course is just a classic cornbread batter that I'm going to spoon on top. To start, we are going to whisk up some all-purpose flour with some cornmeal, a little sprinkle of sugar, some baking powder for lift, and some salt. To that mixture, we are going to add some melted butter, a splash of milk, and 2 eggs that have been beaten. As if this wasn't delicious enough already, I'm taking things a step further by adding in some shredded cheddar, some chopped jalapeno, and some green onion. These 3 ingredients are of course optional, but if you can, why the heck not? Once that yumminess is all combined, we can basically spoon it on top of our chili, which has been transferred into a casserole dish. Then we could just wrap this in tin foil and get it into the deep freeze until it's ready to be enjoyed. Just like the last 2 recipes, the cooking instructions are really simple. Preheat your oven to 400 degrees and cook this until it's nice and heated through. Definitely remember to remove that tin foil for the last 10 to 15 minutes of cooking so that cornbread will get nice and crusty and delicious on top. This stuff is to die for, so go ahead and you just make a big batch, double or triple the recipe, because it is really great to have this stuff in the freezer. There you go, guys. 3 divine make-ahead dinner ideas that I promise you're going to fall in love with. If you give any of these ideas a try, be sure to tweet me, Instagram me, or Snapchat me a photo because I love seeing your kitchen creations. Keep in mind, all of these tasty recipes are in the description box below. And of course, I've got a ton more great dinner ideas in my Dinner Made Easy playlist, so don't stop here. Finally, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell because there is lots more dinner deliciousness where this came from.